what is one of the easiest ways that you can know what a leader is thinking about in a particular agency? And really the answer is just listen to them, right? If you listen to the leaders, you'll be able to understand what's important to them, right? And you'll know what they're thinking, whether it's a leader in a program office, a leader of an entire agency, a department, et cetera. If you listen to them, you'll be able to understand what they're thinking. The problem is, how do you listen to them? If you're struggling to get into meetings because either you can't reach them or it's hard to get on the calendar or whatever, well, many of the federal leaders are out there speaking in public. And I want to show you how to find them and how you can turn the information you hear into gems. And so we got a lot of good stuff I'm going to share today as we go forward. But I want you to keep in mind that, just the answer to the question, how do you know what a leader is thinking? It's to listen to them. And so keep that in mind. Listen as we get ready to do training. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. And I want to welcome you and thank you for joining me today in this live federal sales training where we teach tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years as a small business owner. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When you follow the process A to Z, you're going to have success at the end. What I want to cover is just showing you where you can find, in today's case, podcasts, right? So other times I talk about videos, even written documents or documents. But today I want to talk about podcasts. The reason these are really important is because there's all sorts of gems in there. And you can think of podcasts as a way to be in a meeting. If you can't get in to have a meeting, or you never even thought to have a meeting with somebody, or you want to prepare for a meeting you might have someday, you can listen to a podcast and it's as if you're sitting in that meeting with somebody. They're sharing their challenges, the goals of the agency. They're sharing some really good information, maybe even information you wouldn't have thought to ask. And so it's a really good amount of information they're sharing. And what you can do with it as you learn about it, as you listen and you learn from them, is you can turn that into a next set of questions so that if you get a meeting with them or you get a meeting with some of their direct reports, because if it's like a CIO, maybe you meet with their direct reports, but you can say, hey, I was listening to John talk about these things and I wanted to pull a thread on this one, whatever that is. But by listening to these people, it's as if you just went in and said, hey, leader, why don't you share with me your innermost thoughts on the agency and where you're at and where you want to go? And they're like, okay, here it is. So let me share my screen, and I'm going to walk you through a whole bunch of these. Okay, so I'm assuming I'm sharing my screen. First place I just want to take you, and there's all sorts of places you can find podcasts. There's all sorts of commercial ones. I'm going to show you one commercial one, and these are these ones I'm showing at the moment are all government-based. But if you haven't been here before, I keep telling people about this tool. It's called the Defense Visual Information Distribution Service. Right? DividsHub.net out there. And you can go here and find all sorts of content. But right now, I'm just looking at podcasts. And I'm going to show you some in particular. But I just want you to get an idea as you're looking down, coming in here. They're from all different spots that are out there. And so Defense Information School, the Air Force Radio News, as you come farther down, the National Security Law Department, whatever that is, right? I never even knew what that was. But if I'm in the legal arena or I'm supporting the legal arena at all, this is a good one for me to pay attention to. Coming down, some of these, there's a lot of podcasts in here, but some of these don't really fit. So here, I think this one's talking about just what's important with what's going on over in Korea and information specific to the personnel, the military personnel or the employees of particular command or agency. And so anyway, some of those won't fit for you, but some of them, like this one down here, this is concerns from personnel. So it's focusing on issues and concerns for personnel related stuff. I almost said that it has no interest, but actually if you're in the workforce development space, maybe that's exactly a podcast worth looking at. Here's space power and talking about where we're going with Space Command, things like that. And then this is one of my favorite. I'm going to walk into this one. Inside the Castle does a great job communicating. And this is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, right? So it's fantastic. But the thing I wanted to point out is that there are 39 pages here in this website. 39 pages. There's 10 podcasts per page. That's 390 podcasts. when we talk about finding out what does an agency think, what's their concerns, what's their challenges, what are leaders thinking? Well, this is business development. This is capture, getting in here, hearing what these people are saying. They are talking out there. I had a CIO. He used to be the CIO, I think, of SBA. I think it was SBA, and then he moved on to another place. And one of his biggest complaints was people come to meet with me, but it's completely obvious they never read anything I ever put out there. They asked me about, hey, how do you feel about agile software development or something? It's like, what do you mean, how do I feel? I wrote this whole white paper. I did this podcast. I was on a panel. I've talked about this left and right. He doesn't mind talking to you about it, but he wants to know that you've learned how he's already communicated his thoughts, his goals, his challenges. And I would argue that these podcasts, 390 potential podcasts in here, are just fantastic gold for a business developer, for a capture manager, anybody selling into the government. Okay, so that's the long list. I'll come back to that. By the way, if you want me to send you the link, just let me know. Put in the chat podcast link, please. And okay, so let me walk through some of these, right? This one in particular, it's a shorter podcast and messaging, but it's coming out of the Air Force. And this one's just Air Force news. So I can't remember, they do it every day. It's very short, but sometimes they've got interesting topics where they're talking about hunting cyber threats. How are they communicating to their staff about it? This particular podcast is geared towards the Air Force communicating with itself, with its own employees. And so that's always good sometimes because you can hear about their internal concerns or the internal problems they're addressing. When they talk about cyber threats, you're talking about threats to the obviously to the Air Force, but to the people within the Air Force or through those people. If you're in the recruiting space, here's one I'm recruiting. Down here, the one that caught my eye initially here was partnering through artificial intelligence. And so the topics are bouncing around, but I can go in there and hear what they're talking about. And it just gives me a little bit more information, a little bit more understanding of how the agency's looking at a particular topic in my space. Like I have customers who are in the emerging technology world. And so this type of information is really helpful to them. So a lot of episodes, these guys have a ton. They're just doing it all the time. And that's just one of many Air Force ones. Here's another department. This is the Marine Corps, right? And so this one is equipping the Marine Corps, the United States Marine Corps. But the part I liked about it is conversations about Marine Corps acquisition, innovation, and gear with this host. This guy, I think, is the head of the Marine Corps safety, command safety, right? So I'd have to dig farther into who it is. But the conversations that they go into, it's like, we're all in sales. And these guys are talking about acquisition in the Marine Corps. You should be looking at this. You should have it in your world. Like this first one, right? It might not mean anything to you. And so you can look at the title and move on. Just like an RFI title. You're like, it doesn't mean me. But as you come down, you start seeing other ones that could fit in, but you also start seeing here's Marine Corps operational test and evaluation activity with Colonel Brock. Well, who's he? And I'm assuming he's got his title down here somewhere. Oh, so here it is. So Brock McDaniels, right? He's the director of the MCOT, which is the Marine Corps operational test and evaluation activity, right? If that's in your space, here you've got the director of that program office, because that's what that is basically, is a program office. You got the director of this talking about it. You want to get in there and you want to be able to engage this person and see what they're talking about. If I click on this, right, I can come in and maybe they'll provide a little bit more detail. But one of the things that I talk about, and I might mention it at the end, is that you want to give likes and comment. And so I'm subscribed, right? This is a subscription-based environment where you come in and subscribe. And when you are, you can leave a comment or give a like, but there's no one leaving any of it. And so if you leave something, it'll come up. And especially if you make your comment like, hey, Colonel McDaniel, really appreciated what you're talking about, especially in, bullet 2 or whatever, where you talked about this. And whoever's running this will pass that comment back. It's like, hey, we got our first comment out here. I'm not saying it's always going to work, but that's a way to begin to get visibility. And we'll come back about Colonel Brock McDaniel and talk about it. But this idea of coming through and listening to him talk for 30 minutes about his program office, right? His challenges, whatever. So let me move on to the next one, Inside the Castle. I love this one. So the reason I love this one, the Army Corps of Engineers, basically that's construction, right? They do all sorts of stuff, but basically this is the construction. But this thing is fantastic because it's designed to have real conversations with real people solving the nation's toughest challenges. Yes, some of the challenges. So, anyways, as you come through, you can start seeing these episodes, and it looks like they do these episodes every few days, right? But they're talking about different ones. I'm going to skip the ones that like I don't instantly know. You might know them faster than me. But here I'm looking at planning assistance. That looks good. But this one caught my eye right away, and I think I might have it. Hold on a second. No, I don't have. Yeah, I have it open, so I'll come back to that. But this one caught my attention right away. It's a discussion with this guy, the branch chief of planning and policy division, or the division chief of the planning and policy, right? That's huge. This is this person talking about it, and he's leading a panel of discussion with his direct reports. So not only do I get to listen to what they're talking about and hearing about their program office and how I might be able to support them, what their challenges or goals are, but I also get to know 1, 2, 3, 4 people, 5 people, including the chief, that I didn't know before. And so business development is about listening, understanding that, and then going off and finding their contact information so you get that into your Rolodex, and you can make it part of your task to say, hey, let me reach out to Jeremy and say, hey, Jeremy, I really like that point you mentioned when you were interviewing or on the panel with Eric Bush. Like, I'm telling you, that's an email that will get answered because you're not spamming them. You're referencing something. Hey, could we pull a thread on what you talked about in there? A couple of others that I'm going to go into that one in a second, but here's talking about environmental infrastructure, right? Program manager, right? When you talk about trying to get into the program office and you have a challenge finding and developing relationships, well, sometimes they can be as simple as just doing this type of research. There's many ways to do research, but this one is just spot on because not only do you get their name, number, and email type information, perhaps the contact information, but most importantly, you get to hear them. You get to hear them for like 30 minutes talking about their business. You get to read for them. And sales is about knowing how to prepare going in and talking to them. They might even drop hints, or not hints, but direct comments about what we really need to deal with going forward into 2023 and 2024 is this. Holy smokes. You know what, Eric, you just talked about that. Or Nicole, you just talked about that in the podcast. And it was fantastic. I'd love to talk to you about what we're doing in a sister agency of yours within the Army, not within the Corps of Engineers, but another part, or in the Navy, or wherever, right? I can tell a story. And so just going through these, you find a lot. And if you've looked down my screen, you've seen this one, which is just fantastic, right? It's here we're talking about the inside the castle. They're talking about their budget process, like how they budget for specific work. When I teach people capture, one of the first things I tell them is you've got to understand the procurement life cycle and how they're doing budgeting so that you can understand where that opportunity is in the capture life cycle. Don't use a generic term out there, but actually find out from these guys what their budget process is or acquisition process is. And so down here, here's this person, Vince Navarro, from a headquarters talking about it. I don't know who that person is, but guaranteed I'm going to go look them up and figure out what's going on. Let me come back to this one here because I like this one as well. This is talking about, it's funny, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers planning with planning leadership. Pretty creative title there. But here they're talking about what they do. And the host is talking with, again, Eric Bush. And so this guy, Eric Bush, is in there a lot. Again, he's talking. So these people come in. This is the second one because I think this is a different one than I was looking at. But these things are important, right? This ability to go back and I saw you on this one. I saw you on that. Pretty soon you will be able to have a relationship because you'll be one of the only vendors out there, engaging with these podcasts because they're kind of hidden, right? They're not a secret. They're not fully visible, right? And I'm trying to do my part to make them fully visible. If you understand what I'm talking about here and you're tracking on this, do me a favor, put in the chat, podcasts rock into the chat. So I just went through this one here, which is the Army Corps of Engineers, inside the castle. This one's fantastic. Like if you do anything with construction, you should be listening to this constantly because something could drop. Or when you're having a conversation with a large construction prime, you could be talking about, you know what, I was just listening to Eric Bush or whoever talk about this. You guys might be interested in that. Now you're bringing value to that larger prime from listening to this information, which they probably are not. So this is, by the way, if you want a copy of the link, just put it in the chat, link please, and I'll do that, or Gus, you can do that right now. I wanted to move on to a commercial one because there's tons, 390 or about podcasts in just the DoD. This is DoD space, right? If you go into HHS, you'll find individual podcasts for individual agencies. Those are just government ones, but easily there's 1,000 podcasts that you could listen to in the federal space. You can find a podcast because that's the modern way of sharing information these days, right? YouTube, podcasts, blogging. And so the federal agency is being engaged in that same kind of activity. I want to switch a little bit to a commercial one, and I just want to show you one for today. In this one, if you don't watch Government Matters TV, this is one of the only major television shows based around government contracting, right? And so it's basically like a news show, just like you'd see on Fox or CNN or something. So they got their 30-minute show that they go through, and throughout it, they got different information they share. In fact, if you look at my history, I was a guest on theirs, got my full 6 minutes to go on there and talk about HubZone program and why it was so important and blah, blah, blah. But in here, they do all sorts of information sharing, specifically talking with agency leaders, digging deep in from industry's perspective. What I just showed you a minute ago was the government kind of talking to the government, right? They might share stuff that industry can latch onto, but in Government Matters, it really is about trying to understand the government for industry's sake. You can see in this one, I'm in the sponsored section, which is perfect, but Government Matters is basically sponsored by the largest, right? The smallest, we don't come together yet. That's my dream someday, but they don't. But the largest come together and they try to host this television show as a way to reach out and get access to the CIOs, et cetera. But here, just look at some of these titles, right? Depending on what agency you're looking at. But here's one from NASA where they're looking at, it's coming up on January 31st. They're going to talk about what's out there, what's going on. Actually, let me pull that one up just to see if they tell you who the guests are. So if you come down right here, you can see the CISO for cybersecurity and privacy, deputy CIO for operations. And then usually in each one of these, they've got the sponsor or a sponsor. And so here's Deloitte. But telling you what I would do is I would go in and obviously listen to this stuff. I would begin to try to follow up. I might even actually reach out to Mike and Neil and say, hey, I'm looking forward to hearing you on Government Matters or something. If I can connect with them in a way that's softly in LinkedIn, just let them know I'm interested. And I would do the same with Sam if I find out that Sam is in my space. So if I'm in cybersecurity and these guys might be talking about data or cybersecurity, then it makes sense for me to reach out to Sam and do that typical follow-up. Let me follow him on LinkedIn. Let me see who he is. So if he's at Deloitte, they probably have a decent bio on him. Certainly his LinkedIn profile will, but I'll understand if he's kind of in my space. And I'll say the same thing. Hey, I'm excited for your event. If it's passed, I'll just say, hey, I watched it. It was awesome. I like this part in particular, right? And I may or may not reach out for a meeting at that point, or I can just wait and all these people kind of come around a second or third time. But when you go into something like Government Matters, let me just close that guy. When you go in there, you can find out people. So again, I come back to how do you start and build relationships? One of the ways is to begin to know who you want to build a relationship with. And that's hard for us sometimes. Who's in a program office? When you come to these podcasts or you come into these kind of events, then you're able to get access to it. But look at this. We're talking about the Marines. Looking as you come down, we've got the Army Modernization Decision Dominance, right? I don't know who's in there, but it sure seems pretty interesting. And hey, I work with CACI. Actually, one of my customers works with CACI or CACI. They work with them. I can go in and go, who's in there? Let me go follow up. Hey, that was a good event you guys did last year. Same thing, Space Force, when we're looking at the modernization, federal modernization across the board. One of my customers, just talking to them this morning, trying to get into CISA or CISA or however you say it. Right? It's a whole session where they're coming in and telling us what's going on. So if I come down here, I can see, let me zoom this in a little bit, but here they talk about this organization is, in particular, they're talking about the priorities and efforts being led by CISA to grow the diverse workforce. And that's an interesting thing because I've talked about this in other times, is you can go in and help them as they grow forward. I was trying to look here to see if this is 700,000. That's got to be across the board, 700,000. I don't really care what CISA thinks about industry because I'm not selling to the commercial. But look at who's in here, right? It's the Assistant Director for Cybersecurity. And if I actually took a look at I don't think they say anything about Ryan, but if I looked at Ryan LaSalle, right, I'd be willing to bet that he's at Accenture in some cyber role, right? Maybe it's cyber business development, or maybe he's a cyber expert. But that information is coming out from just events like this. Here's one last one. Oh, I already showed this one. Let me just back up really quick. And then as you come down, there is a lot more. And as you come through, there's nothing wrong with following up later. One of our customers is targeting the Navy heavily, probably on this call right now. But here's Command Data Office. That's huge, right? We got 2 different customers who are in data, and one's data security and one's data solutions. But this kind of a person is somebody definitely worth following, definitely worth learning and seeing what they're talking about. So we'll reach out. And then data director, right? I don't even know, Gus, we should capture these guys for sure. I don't even know if we have those 2, but KPMG, I'm going to go follow, because a lot of our activity deals with data. How it's valuable to you is being able to make sure that you go out and listen to what these people are saying, right? They share all this information freely when they're having a conversation. Sometimes you go to a presentation, you don't really get much, but when it's a podcast and it's just a discussion back and forth, it's really enlightening, and it helps you do your business development. It helps you to capture, as you're going after one opportunity, you can see how they're thinking just generally, and how what you might propose fits to both the specific requirement and the overall mission of the Navy or CISA or whatever. So hopefully that makes sense as we went forward. I really encourage you to go out and find a podcast or 2 that specifically relates to your target agency. I feel like this week I'm talking a lot about going back and looking at your target agency. So don't just listen to me share this information. Go, wow, that was great stuff Neil shared. Go find your agency podcast, put it on your phone, and never miss seeing the episode title again. Take you 2 seconds to look and go, hey, that might be relevant. And then you spend the 20 or 30 minutes listening to it. That's your whole job, right? That's our job as business development and capture and sales, is to listen to our agency leaders so we know what they're thinking. But remember, government contracting, it is not a secret. It's just a process. Part of the process is coming back. I'll see you in the next training.